So I did want to check out React Native just to see it, but I always had my inhibitions, and I had a feeling React and React Native had a lot of differences. And the more I read about it, and I checked out one of the YouTube videos where I think there's three guys who talk about maybe React Native, and the next one I'm going to come to Flutter, and maybe there was even a third one. It was a 9-minute video. If I can find it, I'll add the link to it. It was a good one, actually. It was a very casual conversation, folks talking about what they like about something and what they don't like about something else. After I watched that video and did a lot more reading, I realized that there seems to be a lot of gap between React and React on the web and React Native on mobile. So if you like React, if you do like React on the web, it doesn't seem like it's a natural thing to necessarily pick React Native, just because there is already a gap in terms of the support, whether it's widgets or integration and whatnot. Also, I think that gap seems to be widening. And also, if you read, I think Airbnb was on React Native maybe since the beginning of time, or maybe for a long while, but they just moved off of it for a variety of reasons. You can read those articles and then make your judgments about that. So I read some of that, and then I do have a little bit, tiny bit of experience with that, not a whole lot. So I try to pull some public repos, clone them, play with them, just to get a sense for what I thought I liked and what I did not like. It was all right. The good thing is it's again, if you've coded on React on the web, using React on the web, you'll feel at home. There's not a steep learning curve. That's a huge positive to go with in terms of the language. It's JavaScript, and if you do that already today, then there's one less thing you have to learn. So those are some of the pros. But then next thing I did was I went to github.com just to look at the stars and the number of people forking, number of forks, and the usual due diligence in terms of adoptability. It's got, I think it's 80,000 stars or somewhere around there, if I remember correctly. And in terms of committers and contributions, I don't remember those numbers, but they're pretty good. Obviously, it's a Facebook framework, so you can imagine there's a lot of support for it. But then I was like, okay, if I didn't feel like, okay, that's for whatever reason, it just didn't feel right to go with that, given all the hesitations and reluctant articles I had read about that framework, despite being a fan of React on the web. I'm saying that for the nth time, right? Okay, so I was looking for other options. And then I ran into Flutter. This is Google's framework, right? So you actually, you have Flutter on the web and Flutter for mobile devices as well. And then my experience with Flutter is almost an absolute big fat zero, right? At least maybe up until a month ago, it was zero. Not anymore. It's just I have a month's experience doing some work using that at this point. Anyway, so I looked at that. It's a strong, Flutter is the framework. You have it for the web and for mobile. And then I'm like, okay, this seems fairly new. And I was looking at it, is much newer than React Native. So I was just looking to see what the adoptability was. It was one of the first things. Because this is important. I mean, of course, things can change, and they do change every few months, and things could, something that you pick today could wane in popularity quite dramatically. But again, that's outside of your control. You don't know, you don't have that knowledge today. So you can only make the best judgment using the information you have at this point, right? So I looked at I looked at GitHub and just compared the adoptability between the two in terms of commits and forking and stars and whatnot. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised that for a framework that was a whole lot newer, it actually was very comparable in terms of adoptability with React Native, which has been around for quite a bit. And then, okay, it got me thinking, and I did a whole lot more research into it, cloned some public repos, tried to play with it. And then much like the connectivity you have to certain products, in my case, the Apple product that I mentioned earlier, I actually felt at home, even though I have, the language that you use to code Flutter apps is Dart. And I have, again, I hadn't even heard of Dart for that matter, not done any work using Dart. So I just looked it up. It's a strongly typed language. It sort of feels a little bit like Java, I think, but maybe not. It's a combination of many things. And if you've done, I do Ruby and JavaScript coding on a daily basis. And depending on the project, I do Java coding, a lot of Java coding as well. It just depends on the time of the year. So I work across these three languages, at least at any given point of time. And this did not look entirely different from all of them put together. Maybe there was flavors of Ruby, there was flavors of JavaScript, and some Java in terms of it being strongly typed. And the fact that it was strongly typed made With Swift too, just to jump back completely, there is a slight, much higher learning curve, right? Kotlin's Java, so if you're a Java developer, sure, you just need to get used to the SDKs and then you might be good to go. Swift is a different way of thinking altogether. So that takes a little bit of time if you've not done that work. Just the whole 9 yards in terms of doing it. I love everything about Apple except maybe Swift is all right. Not my favorite language, right? Definitely not. So back to this, that just made me feel at home. I thought I was able to understand without making an effort. And again, I generally don't read a whole lot of documentation before I actually start using something, just because we're small, we don't have the bandwidth, time, effort, and dollars to doing that. So it's typically throw ourselves into the fire and figure out how to go about it. So I started looking at the examples and I'm like, okay, maybe this seems like a good way to go. And I had this hunch. I liked it. I just saw it and I liked it. So I started creating a basic repo and I tried to add some random widgets on the app just to see how quickly I could add these widgets. And I think what I feel is, I think the Flutter actually has a rich set of components. And I'm sure React Native has it too, and there's other plugins and whatnot. But with my initial read and being able to use it initially, I felt like I had the feeling, and I still do, that you might be able to build your app a little bit quicker using Dart or Flutter. I'm actually in the process of drinking that Kool-Aid right now. So unless I find any glaring items that I haven't found so far, I think that might be one of the places I would go to, like to be able to build more mobile apps in future. I might just end up choosing Flutter and Dart. Now again, I read that Flutter, obviously I haven't used Flutter on the web, and Google has Angular for the web as well. So I'm not sure what the roadmap is for these items. And also, I forgot to mention one of the things that concerned me about React Native was just the roadmap. I didn't get a convincing feel that Facebook was entirely committed to it. They probably are, but I just didn't get the feeling by virtue of the research that I did. So Flutter seemed like a more comforting alternative, at least for now. Now, who knows how things can change, but so anyways, hopefully this was a little helpful to you. If you're getting started, I just compared a few different frameworks. I'm sure I missed some here. I'm sure I missed plenty here, but these are the things that stood out. And maybe if you're starting to build a mobile app, certainly do check out Flutter. I think it's extremely promising and it's actually fun to work with. And before I wrap up, in terms of IDEs and what you want to use, sure, it's always everyone's preference. Visual Studio is good. A lot of people use it. I am a JetBrains consumer. I've been a consumer of their products for a long time. Whether it's IntelliJ for Java or RubyMine for Ruby or WebStorm for JavaScript, or for native for Swift, they have, was it called App something? I don't remember what the name is. For Android, you can just download the for building either Android apps, native apps like using Kotlin, or for Flutter, it's the same Android Studio from JetBrains. I actually use that and I'm quite at home because even though these languages and frameworks and dependencies and SDKs change, at least when you go to preferences where you can look for certain things, so you're not spending more time learning stuff that honestly there's not a whole lot of value add in learning. But Visual Studio is quite easy to pick up as well if you like the themes and whatnot. So those are some of the ways to go about it. I'll do some more follow-up videos to how am I getting started with building these some of these pages and deployments and app stores and Play Store and whatnot. But I don't know how long this video has been, but hopefully it helps you. Thank you.